nieces on the Clement side. I'd like to say I was her favorite, but if you Neva, she loved everybody. And she didn't have favorites. If she knew you, she loved you, and she loved hard. If she protected those she loved. Some of you know her by Miss Neva or Miss Martin, or Neva. If you'll allow me, I'm going to refer this morning as Aunt Neva, or oftentimes Miss Sweet Aunt Neva. Miss Sweet Aunt Neva, if I needed someone to pray with me about something or for something, I could count on her to be faithful to pray. She was a prayer, and if you gave her a request, you can count on it that she was praying for you and your request as well. And sometimes she prayed for you when you didn't know you needed praying for her, but she was praying for you. She also prayed for herself because she believed in taking her request to the one who promised to supply all her needs. If you don't know this, Aunt Neva's prayer for herself was that she would get to live in her home all the days of her life, and that she would never have to, and that she would never become dependent on anyone to take care of her. And God gave her that. Last year when she turned 89, the Clement cousins got together and we had cake and stuff with her. And I told her, Aunt Neva, I need you to give us one more year. Because we want to have a 90th birthday party for you. She's like, okay, I'll see what I can do. We didn't have any doubt that she wouldn't make it to 90. She was one of the healthiest, most active people we know. She was still driving her own car places she needed or wanted to go. She lived alone, taking care of herself, and often cared for other people around her. She was a faithful friend, encourager, and helper to others who may not have been in as good health as she was. So it was no surprise to us that she made it to 90, and we were able to have a wonderful 90th birthday celebration for her just over 11 months ago. She enjoyed it so much, and she thanked us over and over and over again. You call her to tell her about something else. Hey, that party, thank y'all so much. She would just go on and on. So if you were able to make it, thank you so much. She really did enjoy it. But then here we come, 1 month to the day past her 90th birthday. She and Jesus decided that was it. That's enough. And she slipped off into heaven. Right there at her own house, just like she asked the Lord for, and with no one taking care of her, just like the Lord, like she asked the Lord. And then her church closed, I'll have you know. It's not exactly clear exactly maybe when she had passed, but I'm just going to go ahead and believe it, that she was dressed for Sunday morning. And she and that determined and resilient spirit of hers just went on ahead and decided she was going to go worship Jesus face to face that morning, instead of with other congregants at evening. Ironically enough, she was such a faithful member there when she wasn't in attendance Sunday. Everybody's like, where's Neva? Where's Neva? I couldn't help but be sad when I heard the news, and maybe a little bit disappointed in her. You made it to 90? Can we go a few more? But God in His sovereignty sees the big picture every time, and He knew what was best, and He knows the right time. And I knew she couldn't live forever, but I sure hoped she would. My pastor recently reminded us, in order for there to be an eternal reunion one day, there has to be a temporary separation right now. And y'all, this is our temporary separation from her. Because of Jesus' death and burial and resurrection, and because Aunt Neva trusted and put her hope in Him, this ain't all there is. For those of us here who have done that same thing, we'll one day see her again forever, an eternal reunion. But y'all, this temporary separation, I'm sad, I'm grieving. Grieving as many of you are, but because of Jesus, we have hope. Paul, in the chapter of Thessalonians, he was given some instruction for people how to live and how to live God and be a Christ follower. And he said this. He said, people were wondering about those loved ones who had already gone on. And he said, regarding your question about what has come up, what happens to those who are already dead and buried, we don't want you to be in the dark any longer. First off, you must not carry on over them like people who have no hope, as if the grave were the last word. Since Jesus died and broke loose from the grave, God will most certainly bring back to life those who have died in Jesus. And then this, we can tell you with complete confidence, we have the Master's word on it. And when the Master comes again to get us, those of us who are still alive will not get a jump on the dead and leave them behind. In actual fact, they'll be ahead of us. The Master himself will give the command. God's trumpet will blast. He'll come down from heaven, and the dead in Christ will rise. They'll go first. And the rest of us who are still alive at the time will be caught up. We'll be caught up with them in the clouds to meet the Master. And then there will be one huge family reunion with the Master forever. So comfort one another with these words. For those of you who are fans of the movie Still Magnolias, I've always thought of Aunt Neva as Clary. Seriously, no, don't get her confused with Weezer. She was not Weezer. I'm talking about Clary. Clary was the beautiful, witty, elegant First Lady of Chicopee Parish. But what is a Still Magnolia? I know what one is. I can identify who qualifies as one, but driving to school yesterday, I was just super curious to know what the internet would define exactly what a Still Magnolia is. And for those of you who knew her well, the internet described Aunt Neva. A still magnolia refers to a woman who embodies inner strength and outward gentleness. Still magnolia is a term that combines steel, symbolizing toughness, resilience, and determination. And magnolia, a southern flower known for its beauty and delicacy, often associated with grace and femininity. Is that one heard? Together, still magnolias describe someone, typically a southern woman, who appears graceful and refined, but is also incredibly strong and resilient beneath the surface. Let me start with that magnolia part. She was a beautiful lady, always dressed to the nines. Her hair was always done. She had a standing Friday date with her dear friend, Miss Loretta, to get her hair done and run errands and the roads. Even Dad, who often did things with Aunt Neva, knew not to ask her to do anything on Friday. She was going to get her hair done. And Miss Loretta, if you're here or if you have family here, she loved you dearly. I'm not sure if Aunt Neva wore much or any makeup, but she was always beautiful. She just had a natural beauty about her. And she always wore some type of simple and elegant jewelry. She was the June Cleaver of the day, keeping her home and taking care of her family. She was an impeccable housekeeper, one of those you could eat off of her floors. And from a godly perspective, she was by far a Proverbs 31 woman who exemplified strength, dignity, and a spiritual depth. That woman who her children and her family, her church, her community truly rise up and call her blessed. And Neva treated people with dignity, even if she didn't prefer you, she still treated you with dignity. She didn't have a mean bone in her body. She rarely spoke of anyone. But on the rare occasion that she did, she had this little nuance that we've adopted, and you're free to adopt it as well, where she would lightly slap herself on her cheek when she said something ugly. One day while visiting with her and my dad, she and I were speaking of a person that neither of them really preferred. And she was calling this person by a nickname I didn't recognize. Well, those of you in the audience who grew up in Edgerly or Benton know nicknames are a dime a dozen. Possum, boon, bird, big no, catfish, peanut, pontoon. I was so confused by the nickname she was using, and I could not identify who this was. I politely stopped the conversation and asked her who she was speaking about. She stared at me for a second. She said, "I'm so sorry. I should not call this person that." So if you need a gentle way to scold yourself the next time you're being ugly, you can join what we've learned from her to scold ourselves when we know we need to be better. She made you feel welcome. It's been years since I've been a member at Antioch, but I've been told there that she wanted to get there early to make sure she could tell everyone hello. She made sure people were seen and heard and valued. She drove bus 423A for years, and I think I can speak for those who rode her bus, including me. You were seen, you were known, you were valued. I'll get to the still part of Still Magnolia in just a second, but for those who rode her bus, we all knew there was a line not to be crossed. Aunt Neva believed in helping children learn how to become fully functioning citizens in the world, and as far as the parents that were on her bus route, they had her permission to help make that happen. I was one of those. I rode her bus. Mom's route left before Aunt Neva's did, and I would stay home to catch Aunt Neva's bus. And I hated brushing my hair as a kid, y'all. Hated it. And one morning, Aunt Neva pulled up, and here come the squeal of the brakes, and the door opens, and her eyes just got really big. She said, "You didn't brush your hair this morning?" I said, "No, it's windy outside." And she said, "It ain't that windy." She was so talented. She was an incredible cook and baker. She decorated beautiful cakes back in the day. She crocheted, she sewed, she knitted, she did everything. She was a perfectionist at it. And what you and I would be okay with something we create that maybe wasn't perfect. My sister Nancy says she can still hear it, and Neva say, "Rip it out, start over." She didn't like that seam, it wasn't straight enough. She had a playful banter. She was very quick-witted, very humorous. I think again back to Clary. I looked on the internet to how to describe Clary, and it described Clary as a wealthy widow. And Annie wouldn't have considered herself wealthy financially, but she also exemplified the verse in Colossians that says, "Godliness with contentment is great gain." So we can all agree that, and she would too, that she was indeed wealthy. But Clary, she was a wealthy widow with a dry sense of humor, impeccable style, and a heart that's just as big as her laugh. She was known for her clever one-liners and playful jabs. She would bring comic relief to emotional moments, but is also deeply loyal and wise, the kind of friend who shows up with sass and support. Think elegant, humorous, and always ready with a witty remark and a hug. She loved fiercely. She loved her family. Brandon and Corey, if you didn't know this, she spoke of you and your families often. She was so proud of those great grandbabies, great-grandbabies, and now the great-great-grandbabies. And please know, we've seen every picture on her phone more than once. I want to encourage you to tell her story to your children, your children's children. Share her Jesus with them. They need to know what a jewel she is. Speaking of love, Aunt Bee loved her animals. And he always had a pet for as long as I can remember. And Brandon named one last night that Mr. T, Mr. T, I forgot about Mr. T. I remember missing Mr. T. But Maya was the last. The queen. Maya got a scrambled egg and cooked chicken every day. I was always a little worried that Maya would pass before Neva did because I wasn't sure how that was going to affect her. But Maya did pass, and just like a still magnolia who was incredibly strong and resilient beneath the surface, and Neva handled it well. But let me share you this story about Maya. Maya and Aunt Neva would often stop in at Dad's in the afternoons to visit with him and drink coffee. But one day I was at Dad's and Aunt Neva arrived in the house alone, and I was surprised she was alone. I said, "Did you leave Maya at home?" She said, "No, I can't get her to get out of the car." Well, that puppy could fit in my hand, two hands, maybe two hands went in. I looked out the window, and Aunt Neva left both the car doors open so Maya would be okay. And there sat Maya on the console, just staring out the window. She was not, staring front out the window. I politely asked Aunt Neva, "Why don't you just pick her up and bring her in?" "Well, I'm not going to make her do what she doesn't want to do." Every few minutes, Aunt Neva would get up, open Dad's front door, and holler out to her vehicle, "Baby girl, are you ready to come in?" Maya just keeps staring at the front. And Neva would sit there and repeat that scenario a few more times. And Neva told Dad, well, after they finished drinking coffee and busy, she said, "She's not going to get out. I guess we better go home." Speaking of the steel magnolias, the steel symbolizing resilience and determination of being incredibly strong beneath the surface. And Neva was incredibly strong. She had loss in her life. And having lived as long as she did, she saw many of her friends and family go on to be with the Lord while she stayed behind. Her beloved knew her Lena, her brother, her parents, but she chose joy. Anytime you asked Aunt Neva, how are you doing? Her reply would be, "Oh, I'm great. I'm great." And I think often when people ask me how I'm doing, I'll tell you I'm good, I'm fine, but that's my obligatory response, right? But Aunt Neva meant it. She was great. She meant it. She was incredibly strong. She decided when Uncle knew passed many years ago she would not marry again. She had loved the person she was going to love for her life. So it was then that she began praying she would be able to stay at her home and take care of herself. And she believed and trusted the Lord to take care of her. But she also took it up on her own means to take care of herself as well. And if you don't know this, she carried a pistol. She carried her pistol most, if not all, places she went. One day she and Dad and I had gone to town to eat and run a few errands, and I drove Dad's vehicle while Dad rode shotgun, and Aunt Neva chose to sit in the back. And when we returned home that afternoon, we dropped Aunt Nee off and then made our way back to Dad's. And not long after we walked in the house, my cell phone rang. It was Aunt Nee. She said, Mom, I think I left my pistol in your dad's car. Well, this was my first awareness that she even carried. It both frightened me and equally inspired me. I was like, oh my goodness. Keeping her on the phone, I walked to Dad's car to go look for a pistol. I saw nothing but this little red sewing bag right here. Much of which she probably embroidered her crafty. It's a little sewing basket on here with Neva on it. I said, Aunt Nee, all I see is your little red sewing bag. She said, that's it. I said, that's what? She said, that's my pistol. I timidly opened the bag. Oh my goodness, y'all, there was a pistol in this little sewing bag. If Aunt Nee was already my hero, this incident pushed her to immortal in my eyes. My sister Nancy and Aunt Nee are faithful to go bring flowers to don the family's graves in Big Woods. And I didn't know this, but Nanny told me that Aunt Nee carried her pistol to the graveyard with them. And they would be there in the graveyard, changing out the flowers. Nestled close to her was the gray Dollar Tree bag with the new artificial flowers, and the red sewing bag with her pistol in it. She was going to protect her and Nanny at all costs, even in Big Woods Cemetery. A still magnolias, typically a Southern woman who appears graceful and refined, but is also incredibly strong and resilient beneath the surface. That was my Aunt Nee. Y'all have no doubt my Aunt Nee was one of the most beautiful, kind-hearted souls I ever known. But she would also shoot anyone that threatened to harm her or those she loved. My sweet pastor in that same sermon spoke up. I learned about temporary separation and eternal reunion. He spoke of how he wondered if our loved ones who have gone on to heaven, if they ever miss us as much as we miss them here on earth. But he felt like the Lord gave him this analogy. He said when he was away at college and we'll be driving in for Christmas, he said he realized his parents were not at home missing him, but rather they were anxiously anticipating his arrival home. Y'all, I don't think this is even scriptural. I think it's more about a Hallmark movie moment that allowed me this right now. I can only imagine Sunday morning, heaven, business as usual. I'd like to envision sweet Uncle New and Lena Kay just having a casual morning walk by the sea of glass, getting ready for another round of worship. And Jesus sees them and strolls over to talk with them. He says, hey, I'm going to get her today. Uncle New says, Neva? Neva says, Mom. Jesus smiles, nods his head gently. Yep. I also envisioned Dad and Uncle Charlie over here somewhere arguing about who's right about something. But they're in earshot and they hear, Jesus said, are you going to get Neva today? And with a big smile, he says, yeah. And they all embrace. They say, we've been waiting for her to get here. We've been waiting. Y'all, it's Aunt Neva's turn. She's going to be anxiously waiting your and my arrival one day. If the Lord tarries, don't let her down. If you've not met her Jesus, that's the only way you'll see her again. And I say that in love, and she would tell you the same. I would encourage you to make it right today. Do what you need to do to get right with the Lord. Jesus, He loves you. He loves you more than Aunt Neva did. But get it right. She's anxiously awaiting our arrival, and so does He.